The Lord be with you. Hi there, my dear ones. Thank you for tuning in yet again for our weekly time together where we sift through all the major news stories in the Christian news cycle and make sense of everything using the Bible as our guide. We've got some big stories to cover this week, ranging from Christian persecution in the United Kingdom to the possibility of a revival in this country. So, I'm so excited to get into it. Let's dive right into the weekly vlog. Okie dokie. Our first story is that of a Labour MP who has spoken out about the persecuted Christians, particularly overseas. The Member of Parliament in the United Kingdom for Newport West and Islwyn, Ruth Jones, who herself proclaims to be a Christian, who was born and raised a Baptist and baptized in her teens, has spoken on behalf of persecuted Christians, speaking about freedom of belief and religion, which is an important issue close to her heart, she said. And she pays tribute to the unwavering strength of those who have suffered loss, baseless eviction from their homes, rejection from employment opportunities, and imprisonment solely for their faith. She is an officer and part of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for International Freedom of Religion and Belief. She's highlighted the important work of Christian ministries and organizations which work with the persecuted church, and she spoke about how they work long and difficult hours, working for the betterment of the kingdom of God, trying to reveal the threat to Christianity from religious extremism, from other religions, political oppression, or government overreach, particularly in countries where it is very difficult to be a Christian. She also spoke about how she has become bolder over time with her proclamation, particularly as a parliamentarian, to say, yes, I am a Christian, to nail her colours to the mast. So she was writing for the Politico magazine. She reiterated a call for the government to address the persecution of Christians occurring in other countries, particularly those with which the UK has trade partnerships, such as China. And of course, we know in communist China, it is exceptionally difficult to be a Christian or a religious minority. Christianity is basically illegal in China. They have a state approved church which teaches Maoist communism. And if you're a religious minority of another group, like the Uyghur Muslims, it's actually horrendous. It's on the par with the great and horrendous oppressions of religious minorities in the past. We've got concentration camps for Uyghur Muslims and re-education camps. So these are terrifying places to be Christians. North Korea would be another example, places like that. And I felt that at long last, me personally, it was glad to see at least someone in Parliament standing up and speaking out for the minority of sort of suffering Christians around the world. Weird she's a Labour MP, but since the days of Jacob Rees-Mogg's retirement, we haven't had a lot of discussion about this in the Parliament in the UK. And Christianity is the most persecuted religious group in the world. There's no denying that. All the statistics reveal that. But of course, a lot of the time, the narrative from those in power is to discuss persecution of other religions and to ignore Christianity, which I think is obviously biased with some sort of agenda to attempt to focus upon other faiths, but to denigrate or to just forget about Christians. It was encouraging, I'm not going to lie. It was encouraging to me to see this MP do this. I wonder, do you think it's an encouragement to see her raise awareness? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments. But I do feel like her discussions about how she feels Christians in other countries need to be protected from political overreach by governments was a little bit disappointing considering the state of the UK. Now, not to say that people overseas don't need our prayers. I mean, news broke this week that Christian leaders in Syria are begging the new regime to assure them of safety and freedom and rights. And of course, as you'll remember, a very pro-extreme Islamist regime has now taken over that country. And that's a great concern to peace and stability in the Middle East. Of course, concern to the safety of Israel. But there are a large portion of Christians who reside there, Eastern Orthodox or Oriental Orthodox Christians, who are in real danger. And there have been martyrdoms in recent weeks. We covered that on this channel only a few episodes back. So yes, the threat to Christians overseas is dire. It costs people their lives to be martyred for the sake of Christ. But for a Labour MP to sit there and to sort of promote the cause of Christians who are persecuted overseas and to utterly ignore the cause of Christians who are suffering soft persecution here in the UK, I felt was somewhat hypocritical. And that might be a strong word to use. I don't want to put down this lady because she has actually done a good thing, but I felt she could have gone further. That would have meant, though, criticising her own government, because much of the persecution of Christians in the UK comes from Starmer's Labour regime. So we saw this week Christian Concern and the Christian Legal Centre promoting a story of a Christian nurse, Jennifer Mellé. Now, she was suspended by the NHS. For those outside of England, that's our social health care, the National Health Service, which we pay for with our taxes. She was sacked by the NHS trust she worked for after she spoke to the media. So it wasn't that she was sacked for what she did, which we'll get onto in a tick, but she was actually sacked because she whistle blew, which I think is a horrendous thing to do. I think if somebody is going to go and highlight the failings of an organization, then they should be free to do so. I think it's an absolutely vile breach of workplace law in relation to sack somebody for being a whistleblower and telling their side of the story. In any case, she was disciplined by the NHS Trust, which she went public telling everyone about, because she refused to use female pronouns on a male patient. And it turns out this male patient is in fact a paedophile. So you've got a literal kiddie fiddler who's pretending to be a woman. You know, it's like my good old adage, that's a bloke. That's a bloke. And as an aside, that's my most popular mug at the moment. People are buying that mug hand over fist. For some reason, people think that's hilarious. But that is a bloke, and she would not back down. Christian nurse Jennifer from saying the truth of biological sex. God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Now, you can chop the bits off. You can have all sorts of surgery, but you're never going to change your chromosomes. You're always going to be the sex you were born and designed by God. Nobody assigned your gender at birth. If, you've got male genitalia, you're a male. If you've got female genitalia, you're female. And it's as simple as that. Now, you can go and live as an identity as somebody else. You can be living in a fantasy land and mutilate your body. I feel very sorry for you. I pray for those people because it's a tormented existence. I would know. I have a close family member who is trapped in transgenderism. But don't expect everyone else to go along with your delusion. And certainly, we shouldn't be offering legal protections and discriminating against people who, on a matter of conviction for their, I was going to say religious conviction, but not only religious conviction, but people who are just convicted of biological reality should not be forced to participate in your delusion. In fact, for a Christian, it's a form of lying. The Ten Commandments are very clear. We're not to tell lies. So this lady is, to me, a Christian hero. She's got a spine made of iron. She wouldn't budge. And this convicted paedophile was once in a high security male prison after multiple convictions. I love how Christian Concern just absolutely expose evil. They don't pull their punches. This is why I love Andrea and the team so much. He was convicted for multiple convictions for luring boys into sex acts while pretending to be a teenager on social media. There's a special place in hell for that son of a gun. And so this lady refused to refer to him as a she while she was on duty. And she then faced racial abuse and physical threats. So she was the one who was suffering because of this person's delusion. After an investigation, Epsom and St Helier University hospitals referred Jennifer to the Nursing and Midwifery Council, who said in a letter that Jennifer is a potential risk. A potential risk for not using this Mr. X's preferred gender identity. A risk to what? To who? I'll tell you who the risk is. The guy who's a nonce. She's the one who's just talking biological fact. God bless this lady. You've got to be brave to stand up to this nonsense. You've got to have some pretty strong intestinal fortitude. The hospital did absolutely nothing to date to address how she was treated by the patient and has continued to treat her as though she was a criminal. So she's the one who's suffered now because of this guy's insane delusions. She's been supported by the Christian Legal Centre and Christian Concern. She's taking legal action against the NHS Trust on the grounds of harassment, discrimination, and human rights breaches in a case that is believed to be completely unprecedented. Beloved, please pray for Jennifer, pray for Christian Legal Center, and if you have a few spare pennies, head over to their website, christianconcern.com, and hit the donate button, because everything they do is pro bono and for free, and they work to help Christians who are suffering extreme persecution. Would have been nice if that Labour MP had have mentioned Jennifer, wouldn't it? Well, the next story is about more Christian persecution in the UK. Again, it's soft persecution for now. No one's beheading us, or throwing us in gulags. But what is happening is a soft hatred, basically, a very strong Christophobia bias against Christianity and traditional Christian beliefs. Of course, the apostate churches that have abandoned the truth of the scripture, they get away with blue murder because they're going along with the cultural zeitgeist. But Bible-believing Christians, they are facing a very hard time. It's shaping up to be a really difficult season to be a born-again Bible-believing Christian in the UK. So the BBC reported that a woman was found guilty of breaching an abortion clinic safe zone. Now, firstly, let me say, and I've said this before on this channel, I'm going to say it again, and if you don't like it, unsubscribe, jog on. Abortion is murder. It is contemporary sacrifice of children to Molech and Baal on the altar of convenience. They are selling a lie through our health service that abortion is healthcare. It's not. It's not healthcare to kill people. And it's, in fact, a dire moral evil upon this country. Now, I don't hate any women who've had abortions, although I probably do hate those who hate thee, who do it with willful desire to slaughter their children. You think of some of these radical feminists, then, that you can safely say that you hate what they're doing. But, think of teen mums who are in crisis pregnancies, who are pressured by family or friends, or who are embarrassed or feel ashamed, or who are told it's going to ruin your career, you're never going to get anywhere in life if you have a child. The commitment of having a child is huge. Why don't you just, get an abortion? Because they don't really think through what happens in an abortion. They're taught that the baby is not alive, that they're just a clump of cells. They have no feelings. No one walks them through what's going to happen. And then, the heinous process of an abortion, whether it's a chemical abortion, which is just gut-wrenchingly horrid, or a physical abortion using the abortionist murder weapons, then actually either way, the child suffers heinous, horrible pain, and the mother is often scarred physically and psychologically and even spiritually for life. And I have met many women, and I've pastored many women who've had abortions, and it's abortion regret is one of the hardest things to work through. So I'm not hating on women who have abortions, but I do hate abortion. It's evil. And dare I say, I have a holy hatred, a burning righteous anger towards those medical professionals who know exactly what they're doing and rip little babies to shreds in the womb and then jog on to have a nice party after work and go and sleep peacefully at night. How they do that with blood on their hands, the blood of the most innocent, makes my skin crawl. I think people like that walk amongst us and they call themselves doctors or nurses, makes me want to vomit. And that brings down God's burning wrath upon our culture. I believe that. I believe abortion is one of the main causes of God's wrathful, vengeful judgment upon the United Kingdom. Anyway, all that said, caveat given, context is king. This lovely lady who I reported on last week, she's a Roman Catholic. The Catholics are so good at pro-life activism. Livia Tosiki-Bolt, she was arrested, she went to trial, and she was found guilty of breaking this public spaces protection order, where it's illegal to pray in your own head. And of course, as I said last week, what was her vile and heinous thing that she did? What was the terrible thing she did? Was she going harassing women? Was she grabbing them and begging them not to slaughter their children? No, she held up a sign that said, have a talk if you want. That's it. And of course, the judge and the prosecution were saying, well, she was intimidating and, her pro-life views may not have been on display, but they were obviously sort of, it was obvious she's a pro-lifer and that would intimidate or harass the women on their way, and they have a right to go to have their health care, to slaughter their unborn children without being disturbed, because that's what these PSPO buffer zones are all about, erasing basic freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and freedom of movement, so that people can go and kill their babies without the possibility of them having a pang of guilt or seeing an alternate option or hearing a different opinion on the subject and stopping last minute, because the bloodthirsty demons who want to see babies killed, they can't have that happening. So they have to have these silly-dilly zones around these clinics. So this lady not only was found guilty, but now she's been ordered to pay £20,000 in court costs, which is absolutely atrocious by pool law courts. A tragedy to see the judge rule in this way, but that's the state of the United Kingdom. We're in the state of, like God said to the prophet Isaiah, woe unto those who call good evil and evil good. That's what we're at. People say that what is evil is good and what is good is evil. But people are basically brainwashed into believing these things culturally from school age up, which is why we have such a problem with education and with other issues. Just this week on X, I had this guy trolling me saying that babies are not killed in the womb during an abortion. That would be a fetus. A fetus is terminated during an abortion. Thanks for listening. As though a fetus isn't an unborn human baby. I mean, it's literally one of the stupidest arguments I've ever heard. And this guy went back and forth arguing with me and other people, saying that we were fear-mongering to turn women off receiving health care, and we should leave medical procedures to professionals. No, to hell with that, mate. That is just murder, and it's murder of the most innocent and precious little beings made in God's image. And I'm not going to back off it, and I'm not going to be quiet about it, because somebody has to speak about it. Somebody has to stand up for the babies. I mean, that's why my brother, the reason my brother, Father Calvin, was cancelled for the last time he was cancelled. They made it about the so-called offensive salute, but it was really because he was speaking at a pro-life rally. And there's plenty of people in the denomination he's in who you'd think they'd be good, solid Christians as continuing Anglicans, but they are lefties. And so they don't like people standing up for the unborn. And it's dangerous to do that. So please pray for Livia and pray for the Lord to provide for her to cover those legal costs. I don't know her financial situation, but goodness me, 20K is a huge amount of money. And it's dangerous to be a abortion antagonist, to be against abortion, to be anti-abortion. People say pro-life. I prefer to say I'm anti-abortion. But anyway, in New York, in a related story, a pro-life activist was left bloodied and bruised after she was punched in the face by an enraged woman. A lefty attacked her. This lady was yet another Roman Catholic who was out in the streets of New York trying to raise awareness. And they were interviewing. There was a group interviewing her as a pro. There was a person out there for live advocacy group who was interviewing a pro-abortion advocate. Of course, these pro-death people about the Planned Parenthood clinic in Harlem. And then the conversation abruptly escalated into massive violence. In a matter of mere seconds, I think in the manifestation of a demon, the unidentified woman aggressively swung and bashed the pro-lifer, striking her in the face twice before she stormed off. And this is what a lot of people on the left will resort to. I mean, a lot of them are possessed by demons or oppressed by demons, but they don't have good arguments for the evil that they support. They don't have good arguments for it. So what they do is they lash out. They scream, they shout, they sometimes hit people, like in this situation. Fortunately, Savannah, Anateo, she's a 23-year-old lass, very brave, very brave. She was not harmed in a way that was dangerous. I mean, she was bashed and bleeding, but she had serious injuries. But it was harrowing to watch the way she was struck so violently, and she's vowed to continue making a stand for pro-life issues and standing for the unborn. So what are your thoughts on the buffer zones in the UK, on whether or not it's safe to be pro-life out there on the streets and go to these pro-life rallies or to make protests? It's a sad and strange time to live in. It doesn't surprise me the last story happened in New York. It's like California. It's like the woke capital of America. But very sad to see. Sound off in the comments. Right. Some kind of good news. Okay, I say kind of because there's the potential for a revival happening in the UK. Now, if you've followed this channel for a while, I've talked about my belief that revival is coming in the UK. Either it's going to get really, really bad and end up in the second coming of Jesus, or we're going to go through some rough stuff for being a Christian, but actually the church will prevail if Jesus tarries in his return. And there's been some new research by Bible Society and YouGov, and they're calling it a quiet revival. And the new data found that since 2018, among Gen Z, now that's the youngest generation, there has been a swelling in church attendance. Now, this is interesting because, for generations, the younger groups in society have been moving away and becoming more irreligious. Now, the vast majority of Gen Z are still secularist and atheistic. But what we're seeing is an increase of 56% between 2018 and 2024 of churches and attendance across all age groups, but very importantly, among the Gen Zers, 18 to 24-year-olds, that attendance has quadrupled from merely 4% to 16%. And that's quite interesting because previously, in the previous survey prior to 2018, the largest group at churches was the over 65s. And I think, a statistic was batting around the internet back in the day that your average church in the UK was, under 20 people on a Sunday and all over 60. And so now we're actually seeing a swell of people coming into the church. Now, my friend, Father Calvin Robinson, wrote a great Substack on this, and he pointed out, and you can go and check out his Substack, and I encourage you to subscribe to it, that actually it's still below the pre-COVID levels of church attendance, but there's this groundswell of young people because they're searching for truth. The old adage, they have a God-shaped hole in their hearts. They're yearning for something of substance, something that doesn't change in an ever-changing world. Of course, Jesus says, I am the truth. He is the way, the truth, and the life. So effectively what they're looking for is the eternal God and the expression of worship and teaching which guides them to that God. Because Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so what we're seeing, and this is what Calvin pointed out in his Substack article, which I thought was a good point, and I think a lot of people might miss. Church Times was sort of cheering about this, but they didn't mention that most of these young people aren't going to the Church of England. And if they are in the Church of England, they're going to the ultra-traditionalist, you might say sort of far-right, Bible-believing churches. So they're heading to the very punchy preaching of the evangelical churches or the beautiful traditionalist liturgy of the Anglo-Catholic churches, and predominantly churches which have male clergy. So what you're seeing is that the Church of England is seen as an irrelevancy to the nation. People have woken up to the fact that they've, sold their birthright. Their lampstands being taken away. They are just sort of the woke mouthpiece of the government now. They're the ministry of religion. And they're looking for churches which are thoroughly biblical. Now, sadly, from the Anglican point of view, there's only a handful of those left in the Church of England. Outside the Church of England, it's a bleak landscape for Anglicans if you want to remain Anglican. So, as you well know from following my story for the last couple of years, I joined the Free Church of England, which ostensibly paints itself as being a life raft for Anglicans looking to flee the apostasy of the C of E. But when you join, especially if you're clergyman, you find you're not allowed to criticize the C of E. It's a bit like that Fawlty Towers episode, don't mention Zivor. You're not allowed to publicly disagree with women's ordination. And there's a very narcissistic and controlling leader in charge of it. It's a micro denomination of barely half a dozen churches. So that option's out for people. Then you have the GAFCON churches. So you've got the Anglican network in Europe. So you've got Bishop Andy Lyons and his 2 convocations, which are growing, and I totally support their work, and I love what they're doing very dearly, but they are very much a niche in terms of Anglicanism. So you have very much sort of a Holy Trinity Brompton or St. Helens Bishopgate style, either evangelical or charismatic church. Very low on liturgy, very low on traditionalism, but at least very solid on preaching the good news of Jesus Christ. You also have the AMC, the Anglican Missionary Congregations, they're fantastic. They're doing amazing work. I know their bishop, Bishop Gideon, personally. He's a true man of God, and I'm very thankful to count him as a friend. But they are predominantly Nigerian. So, they have a particular style of liturgy and a particular style of preaching that is very, very African. There's nothing wrong with that, but it might be jarring to people who are used to your typical C of E service, a typical trad old school Anglican service. Other than that, there's very little going on in the UK. There are some micro tiny denominations who are continuing Anglicans. There's some independent Anglican chapels like my church, Emmanuel Anglican Church, here in Morecambe. And people say, you are what the C of E used to be. And in a way, we kind of pride ourselves on that. We have all the liturgy of the old ancient church. We can stick to the Book of Common Prayer, and we preach that good old gospel without compromise, in season and out of season. But churches like mine are quite few and far between. So what we're seeing is, as people either leave or won't go near for the first time the Church of England with a 10-foot barge pole, and I've had more contact from people this week who've said they've tried their local Church of England parish and they just couldn't stand it. People got up and walked out because, you've got some sort of lesbian lady vicar preaching how much she hates Donald Trump, rather than having a God-fearing man with a pair of balls preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. Excuse me. Got a little bit of a sore throat. My kids have all got a cold. And so people are actually flocking to really hardcore traditionalist churches. So you're seeing the Roman Catholic Church growing hand over fist now with the young 18 to 24-year-olds, including Latin Mass churches, which is very interesting because a lot of them obviously can't speak Latin. They don't know what's going on. But that ultra-traditionalism, that sense of changelessness is very strong. Then you've got people also heading en masse to Eastern Orthodoxy, which itself, a bit like the AMC being very distinctly Nigerian, does have issues in that it's very distinctly ethnically tied to whatever branch of Orthodoxy it is, whether it's Greek Orthodoxy, Russian Orthodoxy, whatever it is. But people are flocking to those very traditional churches with what we might call strongly high church liturgy and otherworldliness to them. And, I think if we can unlock a branch of Anglicanism here in the UK, which is prayer book of Common Prayer, very liturgical, bells and smells, but absolutely dedicated to the full preaching of the unadulterated gospel, I think you've struck gold there to scoop up these 18 to 24-year-olds. They're looking for English Christianity. That's what Anglicanism used to be. English Christianity and the heritage of the Celtic Church. And so that's why when people come to Emmanuel, and we do have a number of young men in particular, there was more young men attending church in this survey than young women, but there's still an increase in young women. We do have a lot of young men. We have a lot of people under 40 who are coming to church because they are dead sick of all the corruption in the world, or they've come out of other churches which are compromised. And, we're only a little parish, chipping away at our corner of the vineyard, doing our bit. But it's interesting to see that on the ground, this is the reality we're seeing as well. And I think if Anglicans could pull their socks up and go with the Book of Common Prayer, because it has got such perfect and beautiful language. It's 85% Bible, but it's also in Elizabethan English, so that little bit mysterious, that little bit otherworldly, and with a solid liturgy behind it, you've got a real sense of beauty and awe as you get a little glimpse of heaven. And I think that's what people want in a world that has become hellish. They want a glimpse of heaven. So not quite a revival in what we typically think, like the Welsh revival or the Hebridean revival, but it is a glimmer of hope in what has otherwise been a very bleak and depressing season to be a Christian in the United Kingdom. So, beloved, tell me in the comments, what do you reckon about this revival? Is this the signs of something new? Is God doing a new thing and sprouting up a revival among the young? Is he going to raise up out of a remnant of traditionalist Christian churches a new and strong outpouring of his Spirit? Let me know. What are you seeing in your church where you attend? I'd love to hear. Right. Last story is another good news story. Christianity's not dead in these British Isles, and it's growing stronger and stronger. hallelujah, praise be to Jesus. The remnant is speaking out, and credit to the folks who rallied at the school. Can tell I'm a little bit off color. Rallied at the school where they cancelled Easter. And lots of members of Chris Wickland's church went there. Pastor Chris Wickland, holding up placards, singing hymns, praying. And parents came out and had a big confrontation because they're woke idiots who are captured by the stupid and vapid ideas of the world. But good on these 50-odd demonstrators who went there. That's a good turnout. And they were chanting, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And one of the people who went there was an acquaintance of mine, Nick Tanconi, who is the man in charge at UKIP, who is a self-avowed Christian nationalist and who gets himself out there at the front lines of lots of different protests and marches to proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ. And if you look up Nick Tanconi on YouTube, you'll find he had a massive confrontation with some parents, particularly a fellow I'm calling the numpty in the blue polo shirt, who was just sort of going into bat for secular liberalism. And you know what? As I watched that video, 10 points to Nick. Mate, you did great. But the guy who was arguing with Nick, he has everything that's wrong with Britain. We've got this sort of emasculated, weak class of men in Britain now who are godless, who just like to live in stupid comforts, sedated by sports or PlayStation, and they're flabby, they're weak, and they stand for nothing, and they'll fall for anything. And maybe that sounds too harsh for you, but I think Christianity is a muscular religion. Christianity has a spine. Jesus was a strong and righteous man. We serve our Father who art in heaven. Christianity is inherently patriarchalist. And when you see men who have just given up on God, given up on all that we held dear in this country for thousands of years, it's pathetic. And you think of our forefathers fighting and dying in the battlefields of the Western Front, or serving in the greatest generation in World War II. You think they fought and bled and died for this country just so that some numpty can come down and shout at Nick Tanconi and tell him, we want him to get rid of Easter, it's great. It's a paraphrase, but that's basically what it was on about. So sad. But anyway, credit to these wonderful people. They did so well, and the protest ended peacefully with minimal disruption. That's how Christian protest should be. You turn up, you make your noise, you make your point known, you make a stand for the gospel of Jesus Christ, and then you move on and you pray for those people, and you pray that what you've said strikes in their heart. What can I say? It's a long way south, but I wish I could have been there. Okay, beloved, a little update from Emmanuel and me. You'd love to hear, so I'm very pleased to share. Yep, as I said, kids all have a cold and a sore throat, including the baby, so prayers would be appreciated. Emmanuel is growing very, very strong. More people every single week. As I said in the story about the quiet revival, we've got lots of young people, lots of people under 30 or 40, and we're getting more folks inquiring, sending messages, ringing, wanting to join. So praise be to Jesus. It's very encouraging. Please pray for me as the pastor, and for Bishop Dave, my associate pastor, and for our leadership team, that we're able to disciple these people really adequately and well, and to build them up in the faith, to edify them, which is why we do a Bible study every single week, and we have 2 worship services a week and lots of fellowship opportunities, and we've got courses planned in the summer, because we want to put out as much opportunity as we can. Obviously, that's all the constrictions of time and energy upon that. So pray the Lord guides me, equips me, and strengthens me. Beloved, really can't thank you enough for all your support and prayer for Emmanuel. You really, really do feel like an extended family to our church, and it's lovely. Lots of people from the YouTube channel and from X or my Facebook turn up at church. And so if you're planning a visit, I call it the Morecambe Mood. If you're planning to visit and check out what we're doing, trying to build a Christian village to withstand Clown World, then come on up. And, people in recent weeks have actually moved house and moved up to Morecambe to come to this church. And I've got 2 or 3 more people who are planning a move, and they're booking in at hotels and motels to come and check us out, and they've got a couple of people coming back for a second visit. They're seriously getting ready and gearing up to come and to roll up their sleeves and build this wonderful church up. So you're warmly invited. Over Easter, if you want to travel, we've got people traveling from as far as Scotland and from as far south as Devon to come up to our Easter services. So if you would like to come, you can see I'll put the image on the screen here, but you'll find it on my socials. You can see all that we've got on over the Holy Week and Easter. So it's a busy schedule, but so it should be. We've got Compline every evening for Holy Week. Then we've got our Maundy Thursday Eucharist and foot washing, followed by our Passover Seder. Then we've got Good Friday, a walk of witness around Morecambe. And if you can get here for that, we want to make Great Britain Christian again. We need to be public in our Christianity. So we're going to wear our vestments. We're going to carry a whopping big wooden cross. We're going to swing our thurible. We're going to sing hymns. We're going to read Bible lessons all out in the open, walking around to 7 different points around Morecambe, unless it's absolutely chucking it down with rain, in which case we'll just do the service in the church. But there will be, if we do the walk of witness, a service in the church for those who are unable to walk that distance. So either way, you're catered for Good Friday. And then, of course, we have Easter Day with our 5:45 a.m. Lighting of the Easter fire. Then we have a 10 a.m. Holy Communion for Resurrection Sunday, and a 6 p.m. contemporary devotional worship time with our Steadfast worship band. So amazing stuff. I would love to see you there. If you don't have a regular place to worship, or if you do and you can squeeze in a visit to us as well, we'd love to see you. The weather is fine. Morecambe's one of the most beautiful places in the country. Please pop on up and visit Emmanuel Church. All right, shameless plug over with. One little prayer request from me. As you all know, my car blew up, so I'm riding my bicycle around. It's been a really good time with my sons. I haven't ridden a bike in years, and it's been great to bond with them and to share experiences together. We've been riding all the way into Lancaster and all the way up to Carnforth and Heysham and having a ball, right up and down the coast everywhere. But I have, from the car crash I had nearly 7 years ago, a large hematoma in my thigh, which is fairly inoperable, a calcifying hematoma. For those who are medically taught, you'll know what that means. It's a whopping big blood clot. It hurts a lot if I do a lot of exercise, and all this bike riding obviously uses one's legs, so I'm in quite a bit of pain. So please, I was walking today down to the shop to pick up some groceries, and I thought to myself, I pray for God to heal other people. I lay hands on people, I anoint them with oil, we gather the elders at church on a regular basis, but I never ever ask for healing prayer for myself. And I don't know why that is. I just want to focus on other people and their needs. But yes, it's livable, but it's a disruptive level of pain. So the Lord spared my life from that car crash. There's a miracle story to that. I could tell you all sometime if you're interested. Sound off in the comments if you want me to do a testimony video of the car crash. I don't think I ever have. But it's livable, but it's a very, very unpleasant level of pain. We'll leave it at that. Please pray. I'd be very thankful. Right, beloved, let's say the collect. I've held you up too long, and we'll go our separate ways. The collect prayer for Palm Sunday. Almighty and everlasting God, who of thy tender love towards the world hast sent thy Son, our Saviour, Jesus Christ, to take upon him our flesh and to suffer death upon the cross, grant that we may follow the example of his patience and humility, and also be made partakers of his resurrection, through Jesus Christ, thy Son, our Lord, who liveth and reigneth with thee in the unity of the Holy Ghost, one God, now and forever. Amen. Thank you so much for watching, my dear ones. I'll see you either with the Five Fathers, 8:30 on Sunday nights UK time, or in the next vlog. And we are working, as some of you saw, I accidentally aired a test video, which was meant to be private, with my sons running around the church. We are working on fixing the live streaming at church. It's more difficult than you think, and it's kind of expensive. So we're working on it. But one day soon, soon and very soon, we will have live streaming back for Emmanuel. Anyway, God bless you all and your families, and I shall see you next week for the weekly vlog. Goodbye.